Welcome. In this lesson, we're diving into 4.1 Risk Treatment Strategies and Control Selection, a core part of the ISO 27001 framework. This explainer is produced by EasyPathUni in coordination with Yazan Ibrahim. Our whole approach here is interactive and simplified, kind of like what you'd find on platforms like Coursera. We'll use plenty of real-world examples to make sure you can see how this all applies in practice. So, let's get started. So why is this so incredibly important right now? Well, get this. Just last year, over 30,000 new software vulnerabilities were disclosed. I mean, that number is just massive. In a world like that, trying to defend against every single possible threat, it's not just hard, it's literally impossible. And that's exactly why having a smart, strategic game plan is non-negotiable. So how on earth do you deal with all that complexity? Well, this is where risk assessment becomes your strategic compass. And listen, this isn't just some technical checklist for the IT department. No way. It's a powerful business tool that makes sure every single dollar, every single hour you put into security is aimed squarely at the threats that could actually hurt your organization the most. That brings us right to our first phase, setting your course. Think of this as laying down the foundation for your entire security strategy. You have to do this before you even think about analyzing a single threat. And you know, the very first question you have to tackle is this: how much risk are we actually willing to take on? This is what we call your organization's risk appetite. It's a super important conversation you have to have with senior leadership because it sets the boundaries for everything else. Are you a super cautious company that tries to avoid risk at all costs? Or are you more of a fast-moving startup that's willing to accept a bit more risk to hit those big goals? The answer to that question really defines what's acceptable for you. Okay, so once you've figured out your tolerance for risk, the next logical step is to know what you're actually protecting. You've probably heard the saying, you can't protect what you don't know you have, and it's so true. That's why identifying and classifying all your assets is the absolute bedrock of this entire process. And when we talk about assets, you've got to think really broadly here. It's not just about the physical stuff like servers and laptops. As you can see, we're also talking about your most important databases, your key business processes, your brand reputation, even your trusted employees who have access to sensitive information. Basically, if it has value to your organization, it better be on this list. After you have that complete inventory of all your assets, the next step is to classify them. Just think of it like a labeling system that's based on how sensitive and valuable each thing is. This little label is what tells you exactly how much protection an asset needs. I mean, it's common sense, right? Critical customer data is going to require way more security than some public marketing materials. All right, so now you've got a really clear map of your assets. The next step is pretty logical. Let's analyze all the dangers they might face. This is where we start getting into the nitty-gritty of what could actually go wrong. Now, this is super important. We have to get two key concepts straight. A threat is the potential bad thing that can happen from the outside, like a hacker, a natural disaster, whatever. A vulnerability, on the other hand, is the internal weakness that lets the threat get in. It could be unpatched software, or maybe employees who haven't had security training. A threat is always looking for a vulnerability to exploit. Now, this chart is pretty fascinating. It gives us a great look at where threats actually come from. We tend to focus a lot on malicious attacks like ransomware, and for good reason. It's the biggest slice of the pie. But look at how huge those other pieces are: human error and system failures. It's a powerful reminder that security isn't just about building walls against hackers, it's just as much about having solid internal processes and systems that don't break. Once you've got all these risks identified, you can analyze them in two main ways. A qualitative analysis is usually where you start. It's a quick way to get an overview using simple labels like low, medium, or high to prioritize. But for a really deep, data-driven look that gets the attention of the boardroom, you'll want to use a quantitative approach. That's where you actually calculate the potential financial loss in cold, hard numbers. So, after all that work identifying and analyzing your biggest risks, it's time to stop analyzing and start acting. It's time to choose your strategy for actually dealing with those risks. This brings us to a huge decision point. Let's say your analysis found a big one, a high-priority risk that is way above what your organization is comfortable with. The red flags are waving. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? Well, ISO 27001 gives you four main strategies. First, you can avoid the risk completely by just stopping the risky activity. Maybe you shut down an old, insecure service.
The most common choice, though, is to reduce the risk by putting new security controls in place. You could also share the financial hit by transferring it, usually by getting good cybersecurity insurance. And finally, if fixing it costs more than the risk itself, you can formally accept it, write down why, and just live with it.
But here's the thing, just putting a fix in place isn't the end of the road. Not even close. Maybe the most important lesson from ISO 27001 is that risk management is not a one-and-done project. It's a continuous cycle, and you have to stay vigilant.
This whole process is perfectly summed up by something called the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. You plan by assessing your risks. You do by implementing controls. You check by constantly monitoring how they're performing. And then you act by updating and improving everything based on what you learned. It's a loop that never, ever stops.
That check phase we just talked about, it is absolutely vital. This is where continuous monitoring comes in. Things like regular audits, running constant vulnerability scans to find new weaknesses, and digging into system logs. This is what makes sure that all those controls you picked are actually working and stay effective over time.
When you step back and look at the big picture, this whole framework is really about a fundamental shift in your mindset. It's about moving security from being the static, check-the-box chore to being a dynamic, living process. Effective security isn't some destination you arrive at one day. It's a continuous journey of adapting and getting better.
And that really leaves us with one final question for you to think about for your own organization. Are your security efforts really being guided by a strategic compass, one that's informed by a deep understanding of your real assets and risks? Or are you just navigating blind and hoping for the best?